An Israeli rights group says dehumanizing and inciting violence against Palestinians has normalised the genocide in Gaza, particularly to the Israeli public. B'Tselem's report marked the first time an Israeli organisation has described the war on Gaza as a genocide. Nida Ibrahim has this report.
אין חשמל, אין מזון, אין מים, אין דלק. הכל סגור. אנחנו נלחמים בחיות אדם.
ההמשך יהיה קשה בהרבה, ואתם תשלמו את מלוא המחיר.
These are some examples of the threats Israeli government officials and army commanders issued to Palestinians in Gaza. And they delivered. A recent report by Israeli rights group B'Tselem says these statements have shaped Israeli military conduct. Phrases such as, "There are no innocents in Gaza," have become part of the military doctrine soldiers deployed in the strip say. Testimonies from troops serving in a division stationed in the Netzarim corridor confirm commanders used these views as direct orders. The area became known as a kill zone.
The promotion of ideologies of occupation, of Jewish supremacy, of oppression, all these have shaped Israeli society into one capable of erasing people's humanity and losing all empathy or moral obligation towards them.
Dehumanizing and inciting violence against Palestinians have created the motivation and public consent for genocide, the report concludes. Officials, army chiefs and politicians have described Palestinians as inherently immoral and collectively responsible for the Hamas attack on October the 7th, 2023. Israeli media have also enabled a public unawareness within Israel to the crimes being committed in the Gaza Strip. The result? A society that approves of Israel's blockade on aid and supports the forcible transfer of Palestinians.
It will always be that the Palestinians are trying to attack and the Israelis are defending themselves. The Israelis in the Hebrew media and the Israeli media will always be the victim. And when tackled with other arguments, the Hebrew media will usually ignore that.
Although mostly used to refer to Palestinians in Gaza, the term bloodthirsty enemy population has also been used to describe Palestinians living in Israel and the occupied West Bank.
They are preparing to annex the West Bank. For them, the fate of Jenin is the same as the fate of Jabalia. They don't want to see Palestinians here.
B'Tselem says genocide is a deliberate and escalating process, starting with Israel's settler colonial patterns and imposing a system of apartheid to framing Palestinians as an existential threat, resulting in genocide. Nida Ibrahim, Al Jazeera.
Well, for more on this, let's speak to Marc Owen-Jones. He's an Associate Professor of Media Analytics at the Northwestern University in Qatar, joining us live now from London. Good morning to you. Israel has arguably one of the strongest PR machines globally. We've seen these over the years. It aggressively seems to peddle a narrative which, in the beginning of the war, seemed to be working in its favour, but the tide is changing, it seems.
Yeah, I mean, of course, it's changing. We've now had almost 2 years of genocidal violence, and the steady stream of the live streaming of genocide through social media channels and some usually non-Western media channels has made it impossible for Western policymakers to ignore the fact that what Israel are doing is brutal, barbaric, and inhumane. And there's an increasing number of whistleblowers. A recent example is a contractor who was defending the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, who's been speaking now to US senators about what he saw. And in his 25 years of military service, for example, he said he's never seen anything this barbaric or the use of indiscriminate force against civilians. So we're just seeing an increase in the amount of knowledge getting through to global publics about what's going on. And it's reached a point where I think Western governments in particular can no longer ignore what's going on without being complicit in the genocide.
When you see reports that are coming out of Israel by Israeli human rights organizations criticizing the Israeli tactics here and actually calling it as it is, a genocide, is that likely to change or shift any public opinion within Israel? And I mention that because it does matter, because if public opinion changes there, it could put pressure on the government to end the war.
It could do, but I'm somewhat doubtful that any of these organizations within Israel, such as B'Tselem, who have now termed what's going on a genocide, have the ability to actually significantly shift public opinion. Let's not forget, for example, in June 2025, a poll conducted in Israel showed that the majority of Jewish Israelis wanted the forcible transfer of, or the transfer of, the population of Gaza outside of Gaza. So to actually shift this narrative would take a substantial effort on the part of the media to actually change their minds. And let's not forget the dehumanization of Palestinians that's responsible for allowing people to support or legitimizing their support for genocide is not something that's just happened since October the 7th. This is a manifestation of decades of dehumanization of Palestinians. So for that, a couple of reports to shift public opinion, I'm not hopeful. And I think the only things that would do that would potentially be, again, years of socialization of the idea that Palestinians are actually human beings, and that would take a long time.
When we talk about dehumanization, our social media is flooded by a lot of the videos of what's going on in Gaza. But how much of that has also made public opinion change? You mentioned social media. That's something you've been covering for years. Or has it can also desensitize people to what they're seeing?
I think it can desensitize people. I mean, the issue now with when we see evidence, I think for most people who are, for example, outside Israel, they will see such brutal videos of babies being maimed and killed by Israel and have a level of empathy. The nature of dehumanization is to put people outside what Helen Fine calls the universe of obligation. Now, the universe of obligation is just this notion that society has an obligation and sees certain people as worthy of respect and worthy of protection, right? The problem is, if you don't see people as worthy of respect and worthy of protection, no amount of videos necessarily of human suffering is going to necessarily change that. So I think if you're already ideologically attached to, for example, what Israel are doing, these videos are not going to necessarily change your minds. They're simply going to reinforce your existing worldview. So, for example, if you see a horrendous video of a baby being killed, of which there are many, if you are, ideologically supportive of Israel or one of these far-right kind of extremists, you just say, well, that person deserved it, or this is Hamas's fault. People will find ways to legitimize their existing beliefs. Yes, there might be some people in the middle who change their mind because of this, but unfortunately, dehumanization is so powerful that rather than seeing the basic humanity, many people will just simply find ways to justify that cruelty and suffering.
Throughout this war, Israel has often put out images and pictures, for example, when it said that Hamas was running its command and control centers under Al-Shifa Hospital. But the community online has certainly been quite clever at being able to see through these videos and images and counter those. That seems to have gone away now. Where is Israel now when it comes to that narrative that it is still carrying out this war because it needs to get rid of Hamas, because it's in every house and in every part of the Gaza Strip?
I think it's certainly amongst Western audiences who we have to remember are important in some respects, especially in the US, because Israel's survival is dependent on the supply of arms and political support from its Western allies. Once it loses that, then it's in trouble. So Israel's public communication has often been aimed at targeted at Western audiences. And I think there is an increase in the realization among those audiences that Israel is lying. But at the same time, there are still people who cling to those narratives. I do think it is very hard now, and I do think people are seeing through this. We've seen polling now in Europe and in the US that shows that increasingly people are starting to be doubtful of Israel's tactics. And now this increases amongst younger people. So I think there's always been some cynicism about Israel's narrative based on age. But now I think we've seen drone footage, we've seen satellite footage now of the absolute destruction of Gaza. And I think trying to argue that there was a Hamas control center under a hospital has become so hard to do when it actually is quite clear, even to Israel supporters, that Israel are actually decimating, destroying the whole of the Gaza Strip in a process some have called domicide, which is the actual destruction of homes and hospitals. So I just think it's really hard now for Israel to even pretend and use these kind of propaganda narratives with any degree of success based on the clear evidence that we are seeing coming out of Gaza.
OK, thanks very much, Marc Owen-Jones, there for your time.
Don't miss out the full picture. Subscribe to Al Jazeera for reliable news and expert insights. Like, share, stay ahead.